Hi everybody, foXnoMad here, and today I want to help you travel smarter by sharing an episode of the foXnoMad podcast, my interview with Professor Mohamed Noor. Professor Noor is the Dean of Natural Sciences and a biology professor at Duke University. He's also the author of Live Long and Evolve, What Star Trek Can Teach Us About Evolution, Genetics, and Life on Other Worlds. And he's also got a YouTube channel called BioTrekkie Explains, where he talks about all of those topics, combining science and Star Trek. And if you love either one of those things, both of those things, or some combination in between, you're really going to enjoy this episode of the podcast. We talk about all kinds of things from life on other worlds, what it would be like to meet Klingons, and all kinds of things that maybe you've been wondering if you've watched a lot of science fiction or Star Trek, maybe things that you just don't know. I think it's a really fascinating conversation. I think you're going to enjoy it very much. I'll leave a link to the full episode of the podcast down in the description below, as well as the links to Professor Noor's YouTube channel and his book. So make sure you check those out. If you really like this conversation, you're going to like both his YouTube channel and the book as well. So those links are down in the description below. And for those of you who don't know, every year in August, I run a Geek Week on my site, which is basically one full week of the geekiest things I can think of on foxnomad.com. And now this year, since there's a podcast and the YouTube channel is up and running, I decided to bring that Geek Week over into the podcast as well as the video side of things. And the reason that I have a Geek Week is usually during a normal year when there's no pandemic, you're traveling and I'm working behind the scenes, getting ready for the upcoming tech season, which starts in September. So I'm working on that while you guys are all off on vacation, and I take over the site for a week while everything is on hiatus, and I post the geekiest things. And we have Star Trek, Harry Potter, all kinds of things from guest writers and so on. So that week is going on right now. If you want to check that out, that's on foxnomad.com. But for now, enjoy this clip of the foXnoMad podcast. Like I said, links to everything that we discuss down in the description below, and I hope you enjoy this clip. Now, let's say we went to a planet. Let's say we go to Mars, for example, or some other distant planet, and we find Klingon bones, and just fossils of Klingons.
Okay.
Now, obviously in Star Trek, their bone structure is different than ours, more or less. They have more ribs and redundant organs, but based on the fossils, what could we tell? Would we think they're hominids? Would we go, oh, hey?
Yeah. I mean, we probably would. I mean, it's honestly to some extent no different than, digging and finding, Homo erectus here on Earth, right? Because it's going to look just about that similar. So yeah, that's probably what we would be thinking. We're thinking like, how on earth did that happen? How did they come? Again, the most plausible explanation is that they came from Earth in some way, but how did they end up on Mars?
So even if the new Klingons in Discovery, which look very different than the 60s Klingons, they're still pretty much humans, right? From a biological point of view, when you look at them.
Yeah, at least humanoid. I mean, in the sense that it would seem to be something with which we shared a very recent common ancestor. It's very unlikely to be something completely different.
And what do you think?
Unrelated, that is.
Yeah, I guess it sort of shatters many of our dreams that, maybe aliens could kind of be close looking to us.
So you raise a good question there. So now close looking, in the sense, could they be potentially about our size? Yeah, that could be true. Could they be bipedal? Maybe. I mean, that's not crazy. So some aspects of look like us are feasible, but it's just that similar, where the bone structure is that close and the overall appearance is that close. That's where it starts getting iffy. But it's a good point.
Do you think an alien would have similar sensors as we have? Eyes, ear for sound, smell. It seems pretty common on Earth. So.
Yeah. Well, so that's the key, is like you said, it's on Earth that it's very common. And partly it's common on Earth because we share, common ancestors with all these other species. But part of it's also, this is what was adaptive on Earth. So for example, let's say you're from a planet that has, very, very light atmosphere. There's not as much to vibrate, to make sound work as well. I mean, maybe they will have evolved, some sort of sensor organs that are sensitive to something in the EM spectrum, but maybe not visible light. Maybe it's like a range within ultraviolet or range within infrared, or including visible light, but going way past it. I mean, even here on Earth, there's animals that can see into ultraviolet or infrared too. So it's possible they'd be able to do those things too.
There's in Star Trek 4, the whole premise of it. There's one line by Spock where he says, there's a probe coming and they're sending signals to Earth that is messing everything up. And he says, why do you assume it's to humans? There's other
human arrogance, he even said, if I remember right.
And I've always thought about that. It makes me wonder, how do we know? So I guess, Homo sapiens, us, are 200,000-300,000 years old or so, from my understanding. And when I looked up whales, I'm like, oh wait, whales have been in their more or less current form for a lot long, millions and millions and millions of years. Mm-hmm. So how do we know that they don't have some kind of intelligence in terms of, they can't manipulate fire, they're underwater, so they can't really make stuff, and they've got fins, No,
it's true, and probably a lot of species probably do have some sort of intelligence that we're not as aware of. And we've seen that, that there are animals like crows that can use tools and things like that. So, I mean, we see that there's some elements of that. Now, that particular example is a little bit funny in the sense that that probe is coming and it's making these whale sounds in space. I'm not even sure what that means. Like, how do you make sounds in space? Like, is it emitting that by radio wave? And we're pretty sure, like, we've never seen any indication that whales are using radio signals. So there's some funny things there that are happening.
Yeah, like how did that dialogue begin? How did the whales communicate outside of the sea, basically?
Exactly. And as a suppression, we keep hearing that sound. But like, what is that? Like, it's obviously not doing that in sound in space. So it's not clear as we're seeing that in the movie what's actually happening there.
It does make me wonder, if we can't, when we think about whales, we don't try to communicate with the whale leader, or we don't even really look at whales as equal to humans, I could say. So
fair.
Why do, it always makes me wonder, if aliens come here and they're so advanced that they can come here, why would, maybe they wouldn't look at us any differently, and they just go, these are basically ants on this planet.
Yeah, roaches.
So,
you're right.
Evolution seems to favor animals that are competitive and not very nice. There's a limit to cooperation.
It's true. I mean, Star Trek does paint a very positive picture that, like, all these species are out just sort of exploring and seeing things, but they have a few sort of conquerors, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were aliens. I wouldn't be surprised, and if they're intelligent, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them are what we would perceive as conquerors. They're coming to our planet to take some resource, and of course, a lot of science fiction does that. I mean, that whole series was sort of premised on that.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed in Star Trek. So if let's pretend Star Trek is real, which I think we all do.
Oh yeah.
If, let's say, you were the first science officer on the very first mission, and you come across the Vulcans, and you see Vulcans as, they've got pointy ears, but more or less they look like us. How would a scientist react to that? Would that be the most interesting thing about them? That, wait, they look exactly like us, more or less.
That would be shocking. That would be truly shocking. I mean, honestly, the fact is not, if we see an alien life, the most likely kind of alien life we'd see is probably, honestly, microscopic. Because, you think about like the first, couple of billion years on our planet. That's all that was there, right? So it's very likely we'd see something microscopic. Something that's large and similarly intelligent and can communicate with us and looks that much like us, we'd be like, what the heck is going on here? I mean, honestly, probably the very first impression people would have is that it's fake. That's probably what it would be.
So it would just be shocking and almost disappointing, I would imagine, just to see all these alien races that pretty much look human.
So one thing they've never done, and this would sort of answer that big question in Star Trek, is take DNA sequences of various humans, of various other aliens, which, I mean, we've said that they have DNA that's come up in various series, and compare them to each other and compare them, say, to chimp, gorilla, things like that. And you could answer that question about, like, the origins then very easily, because if, let's say, for example, an ancient hominid went off and that's what the origin of, say, Romulans and Cardassians or whatever, then we should have DNA sequences that are more similar to Romulans and Cardassians than we do to chimp. So it'd be very straightforward to know, and that's not happened as far as I've seen in a Star Trek episode. I mean, they've talked about their DNA and saying it's compatible and things like that, but.
And is DNA universal in this? Do we expect DNA to be found on other planets, or is that also as different, or is it something we don't really know, but would it be totally different on another planet with another whole evolution?
That's a great question. I mean, to some extent, one of the definitions of life is that there's heredity in some sense. Now, does that have to be does that have to be DNA based? No. There's no reason it has to be DNA based. I mean, DNA is a very good molecule, but it's a very good molecule with the set of conditions we have right here. Right? This is kind of like the idea of like, would we see something that's even water-based or carbon-based, things like that. A lot of those things are perfect for where we are. But let's say we're on a world where the range of temperatures was from -200 to -50 Celsius. Water-based organism would not be a good thing to have there at all. In contrast, something like liquid ammonia or something like that might be a much better solvent for life there. And the same sort of thing would happen with regard to heredity and things like that. It very much depends on the environment which it came out in terms of what would be optimal.
Thanks very much for watching that clip. Thank you very much, Dr. Noor, for taking the time to talk to me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for watching. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. It's a big help. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.